other religions in Sri Lanka is based on the Trinity. Buddham Sarana Gacchami. Dhammam Sarana Gacchami. Sangham Sarana Gacchami. I take refuge in the Dhamma. I take refuge on the Buddha. I take refuge in the Tama. I think Buddhism also is based on the Trinity. Shiva, the creator. Shiva, the sustainer. Shiva, the destroyer. Christianity also is based on the Trinity. Right? What's your point?
Well, I hope you do soon, because we know this. What is your question?
Christ, I'm coming to that. Christ, the Father, Christ, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I want to know from the learned speaker, if that is so in true religion, that is, in Islam and Buddhism, the triple idea is separated. In Christianity and in Hinduism, the triple idea is one. I would therefore believe that the learned lecturer believes that in Christianity too, that Christ, they are two separated. God, Christ, the Bible, the Holy Book, and Christ, the messenger. Do they believe it in that way, or do they believe Christ as God, Son, and the Holy Ghost?
I don't think there's, well, there are a handful. There are no Christians, aside from one handful who call themselves Jesus only, who believe that Christ is all three together. That's a very heretical view, just as I don't think there are any Hindus who talk about Shiva, 1, 2, 3. Shiva is the name of one individual. What you're talking about is a long ways from trying to make some kind of a parallel. You're saying in all religions there are three things. Yeah, there's a lot of boxes I open up and there's three things in them. What does that mean? One time Jesus said Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What do you mean? They're all three? Each one is the father of the other? Or you name me three items. The Trinitarian doctrine is saying I have three items and each one is the whole thing. Now you don't have that in Islam. You have Allah, and Allah is not the Quran. And the Quran is not Allah. The Messenger is not the Quran nor Allah, and so on. There's no parallel whatsoever saying there's three things. And I can name 4 and 5 and so on. There's this and there's this and there's this in Islam. If all you want to do is say in every religion I can name 3 objects, yeah, I agree with you. If you want to say in every religion I can find Trinity, I tell you that's not true. You find Trinity in some religions and some you don't. Because Trinity says this one is God and this one is God. But this one is not this one. These are different. But there's one God. That's the starter. That you find in a lot of religions. You don't find that in Islam. You don't find it in many religions. You don't find it in Taoism, for example. One of the, in my opinion, the nicest book I ever read in the last few years was the Tao Te Ching, because the thought in there is very Islamic. I don't think many Taoists realize that. God is one and so on. This is a very clear kind of a thing. But anyway, you're entitled to your opinion. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. No, that's worrying that it's not relevant. Quran describes hell and heaven. Hell an unpleasant place to stay, heaven a good place to live. Want a logical explanation for heaven and hell and torture in the grave. Well, to start with, the Quran does not talk about hell and heaven, okay? Unless you understand those words properly, it nowhere talks about heaven, nowhere talks about a garden, and it talks about paradise, but it doesn't talk about heaven. It talks about the heavens, which you look and you see overhead. It doesn't talk about you, your reward, you're going to live in heaven. But a long time ago, that word heaven didn't mean heaven up there in the clouds. It meant haven, meant a nice place to be. So if that's what you mean when you say heaven, yes, God is going to provide a nice place for me. But in heaven, no, that's a different story. Same goes for hell. Hell used to mean, centuries ago, the grave. It's where you buried things. When you buried potatoes, they used to say you held them. You were helling potatoes. You put them in hell. Once you dug a hole, you put them in. Now hell comes to mean something like a burning, fiery place. Well, the grave is one place, and this burning, fiery place you're talking about is another item. That goes under the name Jahannam or Jahim or Gehenna. And Gehenna is not hell. If by hell you mean the old grave. But as to what does the Quran say, if you want a logical look at life after death, the scientist today accepts, generally speaking, maybe there's some that don't, but generally speaking, the scientist accepts as a basic article, although he can't prove it, but he accepts it, what's called a conservation of matter and energy. Which means if I have some matter, I can squeeze it and crush it and kick it around and grind it up and burn it and do whatever I like. I'll never get rid of one bit of it. It will still be there in some form. You cannot destroy matter. You can turn it into energy even. And the energy you can turn back into matter. But the total amount of matter and energy never changes. Doesn't grow, doesn't decrease, no matter what you do. And that same man, if he's deeply involved in physics these days, if you ask him what is matter, so you keep going to the bottom, what happens? You keep taking things apart. You keep finding smaller and smaller pieces until you know actually what you get down at the bottom is not a piece of anything. You just get an idea. You get a thought. You've got a relation between this and this. You don't have any pieces left. You just have relationships, an idea. Well, put all that together, and what does that tell you? If you have a man and he's dead, and you crush him and grind up the body or burn it or whatever, can you completely get rid of him? Can you completely smash him out so he does not exist anymore? What happens to his thoughts? They might be damaged. His thinking might be pretty cloudy, but can it completely disappear? Well, the scientists, if you think about it that way, they'd say, well, no, of course not. You see, has to be someplace. And that's basically what the Quran tells us. It's what the Bible says, for that matter, what the Jews believe till now, that when man dies, it's like falling asleep. His thoughts are something like thoughts when people dream. They're not particularly clear necessarily, but there's some kind of awareness, no matter how crushed up his bones are. Some little bit of him still is hanging on, because you cannot spread him far enough that he disappears. And so the Quran says the grave is something like sleep, and one day you'll be reassembled, and you'll think you've only been asleep for a little while. People say it's only been a day or two, hasn't it? As the Quran mentions something like this, if we were just gone for a few hours. But now, whether the grave is a comfortable place to rest or uncomfortable depends on what's on your mind. You see, suppose you are a condemned murderer, and they tell you tomorrow morning when the sun is up, you hang. And then your jailer puts you in a cell, he says, pleasant dreams. See, if you can get to sleep that night, probably you won't have pleasant dreams. What's on your mind is, 6 o'clock in the morning, I hang. On the other hand, if at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning you leave on vacation, probably you'll have pleasant dreams, at least if you can get to sleep. You know what's waiting for you when you get up. And so it is said of the grave that people know what's waiting for them when they wake up. So whether they're resting comfortably or they're tossing and turning, that is mentally, depends on what they know. They know what to expect. There's no surprises, the Quran tells us, on the Judgment Day. No surprises. It's not a matter of people are going to be waiting for the verdict on the Judgment Day saying, what is it going to be, heaven or hell? Oh,